NBC News. The world's eagerly awaiting the special presentation of Fast Freddy Live. But before we turn the show over to Freddy, Bob Sled is here with headlines. Bob?
Thank you, Penny. The sports world was devastated yesterday when Gordon Waters of the George Walton Academy Bulldogs went down with a broken leg. Fast Freddy was on the scene as usual and reported Gordon's condition as spaced and somewhat weary. We'll get more to you as it comes in.
And now we'll turn the show over to Fast Freddy. With him is Pally Sue, who's going to help us turn a few pages back in time and remember the way it was. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Fast Freddy Live.
Come on, baby, let the good time roll. Come on, baby, let me thrill your soul. Come on, baby, let the good time.
Thanks, Bob Sled, and welcome to Fast Freddy Live. Here today, we're interviewing Miss Pally Sue Adcock. We're going to welcome her to our studios, and we're interviewing her about her recollection of the Depression. Welcome, Miss Adcock. First of all, I'd like to start off with you telling us and our viewers how the Depression affected you in the beginning.
Oh, it affected me a lot. Times was really hard in Hoover days.
Hoover. Herbert, I suppose you're talking about.
Herbert Hoover.
Yes. And the days of those times were pretty rough in your family, I see. And you were very happy when Mr. Roosevelt became president, I assume. Just like most of the country at that time, Ms. Adcock's family was very happy when Roosevelt became president. Could you tell us why? Just a few examples.
He started the new program.
New programs. And
We had more money.
yes, they had more money and
Security.
so Social Security. Yes, he started many things to help out the poor during this time. And I believe that Miss Adcock, you lived on a farm, didn't you?
Yes, we lived on the farm.
And you grew most of the food that you ate.
That's what we lived on. That's what we raised on the farm.
Yes, ma'am.
We raised wheat and corn and just vegetables.
Yes, ma'am. And what kind of transportation did you have in those days?
We had a Hoover buggy.
A Hoover buggy, ma'am?
Had a Hoover buggy.
Could you elaborate on that just a bit?
Well, it had two big wheels and just a little plain seat that
And
we sat on.
what type engine propelled this vehicle?
We had a horse.
A horse. I see. And when did you get your first gasoline vehicle?
It was about 10 years before we
And who was the president at that time?
don't quite remember.
It was after Roosevelt's term. After Roosevelt's term. Well, I'd like to ask you, do you feel that the Depression was more affected on the people around you in your surroundings or more on your family?
My family was really affected. There was about 6 of us in the family, and it was hard for us to have food for all of us.
Yes, ma'am, and like you've already said, you grew most of that
We
food,
grew
right?
most of the food.
And did you have hired help or did you yourself work in the field?
Worked in the field.
You yourself?
I myself worked in the field, chopped cotton, and my husband plowed the fields, didn't even have a tractor.
Plowed it, I suppose, with a mule?
One horse plow,
One horse plow.
one mule.
Yes, one mule. Well, could you, using your best recollection of the presidents, Hoover and Roosevelt, compare and contrast each one as to what they did for the people at that time? Starting with Hoover.
Hoover didn't ever do anything for us.
Well, I guess you didn't like him very much, did you? No. Well, could you tell us a little bit about Roosevelt?
Roosevelt was wonderful. He started a new program. We all started having more money and living better at home.
Yes. Well, could you tell us when things started to change for you and more income started to come in and your life got a little easier?
I remember that in about 1935, I got a job at Cobwood Manufacturing Company.
And that's a textile plant here in...
That's a textile plant in Monroe. And that really helped me a lot. That helped my family.
Just wondering here, what exactly were your wages at that time?
I think we made about 35 cents an hour.
35 cents an hour. Yes, well, and your husband at the time just continued to farm, I assume?
Continued to farm.
Yes. Changing the subject now, we're going to move right along up through those 30s and hit the 40s when World War II erupted the nation. Ms. Adcock, could you tell us now your first memory of learning about the war?
Yes, I remember well that I had two brothers to go to the war and a brother-in-law.
Yes, and they both went overseas?
Yes. And that was an awful thing in our family.
Turmoil hit the little farm, huh? Yes. Well, did you hear from your brothers very often during the war?
Yes, we heard from them about once a month.
Where were they stationed?
Overseas.
In Europe? Well, how did things change around the home front during the war?
Well, with them being gone, we had to get extra help to help on the farm.
Well, what did you do about that help? I mean, how did you go about finding it? Because I'm sure many of the young men were gone to fight.
We got some colored people to help.
I see. And they weren't hard to hire. I understand. Well, your husband, I guess.
I think they was paid at about $1.50 a day.
Uh-huh. Well, and your husband, he didn't have to go?
No, he didn't have to go.
Did you have children at that time?
No, I didn't have any children.
Yes, I see. Well, what about the economic situation here in the States during the war? Did prices rise on goods?
Oh,
And
yes.
yes,
They started going up. And
to pay for the cost of the war. Yes. And many, of course, of the businessmen had to go and fight, so it was quite an economic impact here in the States during the war. Well, could you elaborate a little bit just on how things were going around your house, how you felt with your brothers gone, and how they returned safely, I assume, I hope.
yes, they all returned safely.
And towards the end of the war, when did you first realize that it would soon be ending?
When it was announced, we heard on the radio that the war had ended.
The president announced it. Yes, and when did your brothers return immediately after it was over?
No, it took them about 6 months to come home.
Well, as soon as the war was over, how did things change when everything got back to place, say in the next year after it was over, as far as economic
Well,
things go?
the boys that came back were kind of shook up, and it took them a good while to get back to normal.
Well, of course, as everyone knows, the war was not fought here in our own country, but we ourselves were hit very hard economically, and there was a large strain, I'd say, put on workers after the war was over to pay the debt for the fighting. What kind of burdens did that put on you as a worker at Carwood Manufacturing Company?
Well, we made government pants and coats at the plant, so it it helped out the plant. You know, it kept us going. And that meant well at the plant because we made pants and coats to match.
To send to the troop. So everyone was pitching in to help.
Oh, yes.
And after the war was over, though, did things pretty much go back to normal at the plant?
Yes.
As far as
Yes.
payments and...
We made something else different.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see. Well, we're so glad they did. And Miss Adcock, we'd like to thank you for being on our show this evening. And right now we're going to send it back to Bob Sled back in the studios. And keep your eyes open for future Fast Freddy specials, and hopefully I'll be coming at you. This is actually our last show here from Fast Freddy Studios in Burbank, but we're going to be coming back with you some specials, and hopefully I'll see you somewhere in the future. Thank you. Bob?
Indeed. However, I would disagree on Pally Sue a little bit. I feel that by the time Hoover got in office, there was nothing he could do to stop the Depression from happening. Penny?
Well, Hoover had such a hands-off policy about the government anyway, and Eleanor had such nice clothes.
In our worldview tonight, renovations are near completion on the stadium in Hammerfest, Norway, where the premier card of the JTWA will be held. The world heavyweight champion, the Barbarian, and his manager, the F, are continuing a rigorous training schedule in preparation for the former intercoastal champion, the Phoenix. We leave you with some of the vault footage of World War II. Have a nice day.